We will be recording this, and we hope to keep this to right around 45 minutes, depending on how many questions we get. But we will record it, and we will send everybody on this call, everybody who signed up for this WebEx will get a recording in the next week and a half or so, so that you can sit back and listen to it again at your leisure. So I'm Jeff Leach, and I'm co-presenting with Dan Dickerson. We are SiriusXM Marine team members based out of the Washington, D.C. office. We also have the pleasure of having John Spittle on board with us. John is Garmin Marine's training specialist. So if there's any specific Garmin-related questions, we can direct those directly to John. So this is what we call our 200 level webinar. This is for those who have the service or will have the service soon. And we're going to really walk you through each one of the features and functionality so that you really best understand how to use the service. We recognize that much like SiriusXM Weather, not all the features are immediately intuitive. And for some, even some of the screenshots may look like a handful of colorful spaghetti. So we want to walk through each one of these features and really help you understand how to use them. Before we get started and we tell you guys how to chat with us and how to communicate with us back and forth, because we definitely encourage your questions, I did want to point out that Dan and I are not oceanographers. Having said that, Dan and I have spent an inordinate amount of time using the service, looking at these screens, verifying the service offshore fishing. And we have also worked with a lot of our pro anglers out there using the service, understanding the service, verifying the various features. So we have teamed up with an oceanographic group called Maxar. So we have a team of PhD scientists that are putting this data out for us on a regular basis, who we are in regular contact with. So that's the intro. And now let's move along to the next screen. The service, as you guys hopefully all know, starts with Garmin. Garmin is the first to launch fish mapping in partnership with SiriusXM. You do need software version 16, which came out this August, or more up-to-date software. So anything since August to now will enable fish mapping. What you'll notice is when you first install fish mapping is you have some new screenshots. You have some new icons on your screen. The fish mapping icon will appear, and that is the first time that you connect the antenna to fish mapping to the service. And then you'll notice too that the previous icon called fishing has now changed to sea temperature, and that will have your sea surface temperatures incorporated into it. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through each one of the layers. So as soon as you go and click on the fish mapping icon and then touch the menu button, you're going to see this fish mapping menu. And we're going to walk down through each one of these layers just so everybody on the call understands the features and functionality underneath these layers. So the first button is layers. And that accesses a submenu to select all 8 features, which we will go through individually. The next is loop. Loop, we're going to hold off on that until we talk about weed lines. Loop is a weed line animation feature. The next one is legend, and that shows the legend on the left-hand side of the screen that we'll walk you through. And then last but not least is subscription. This is actually a new feature, and I think you all will see that it will really come in handy for understanding the service and when the data updates, etc. So, all right, let's walk right through each one of these. First and foremost, fish mapping is what we call a superset. It includes all of the offshore weather features. So for those of you that are already using offshore weather, fish mapping, when you sign up for it, includes all offshore weather plus 8 new dedicated fishing features. And here's how they're laid out. So sea temperatures. So if you look at that first layer on the left-hand side there, sea temperature encompasses 3 separate features. The first of which is sea surface temperature contours, then there's sea surface temperature front strengths, and then last but not least is 30-meter subsurface sea temperatures. The second layer down is plankton concentrations. Plankton concentration has actually 2 features within it. Plankton concentration contours and plankton concentration, or plankton front strengths rather. And then the remaining 3 features are surface height anomaly, weed lines, and fishing recommendations. So we'll walk you through each one of these individually.
Yeah, just a note here, when you tap on the sea temperature button, that's when these 3 choices are going to come up, and whichever one you select, then it shows up over here. So we had the 30-meter subsurface selection made when we took this screenshot. And over here, Plankton, same way. You tap on the button, and then these 2 choices show up, and you can select one of the 2. So in this case, we had selected front strength.
Right, and as also, Dan, if you put the cursor over by the side, you'll see that there's an illuminated green bar going north-south that'll show you that that particular feature has been chosen.
For these 3 features. In this case up here, there is no green bar. It tells you by showing you what level you've selected.
Right.
Instead. All right.
Okay, so the legend, this is the map legend. We highly recommend enabling the map legend because it allows you to see the various features that you have turned on. And in this particular case, we have pretty much everything turned on here. So the top is all the fishing recommendation, all the fish species. Down below is plankton concentration. Then there's sea height anomaly, followed by weed lines. One thing we do want to point out here, which is new and different, is at the bottom of each one of these features over on the map legend is an actual displayed time frame. This is rounded up to the minute, up to 59 minutes or hours. And you'll see the data actually when that data came in right there. We'll show you another way to do this as well. Okay, so this is the fish mapping subscription layer and what it looks like. This is critical. When you first turn on your fish mapping service, you won't see anything on your screen. It takes a little while for all this information to be uploaded into your plotter and actually show real time. And everything updates at its own speed and own rate. So look at the received column on the far right-hand side there. That's exactly when the data will start showing up on your screen. And you'll notice, again, if you go right to that subscription layer, you'll start noticing this information populating.
And I'm going to pick up for just a minute, Jeff.
Yep.
When we're back on this screen here, this is the subscription button. So when you click on that button, that's what takes you to this screen.
Yep. Yeah, good to point that out. So all of this information is updated in different time frames. So the first is sea surface temperature contours on the left-hand side. I'm referencing the list on the left. And every 3 hours, sea surface temperature contours are updated. And then by 5 a.m. every morning, you have a whole list here that's updated, weed lines and 30-meter subsurface and sea surface temperature front strengths, as well as sea surface height anomaly. That's by 5 a.m. Eastern time every day. And then by 10 a.m. Eastern time every day, you get plankton concentrations and plankton front strengths. And then twice a week, our oceanographers update on Tuesday and Friday by 5 a.m. Eastern time, the fishing recommendations feature. So an important screen to go to, especially when you first turned on your service, to see when the signal has been received and these features are being received by your MFD. Okay. So the first and probably easiest to use is fishing recommendations. This is really the, you turn on your recommendation, you choose your fish species from the drop-down list here on the left, and you can see that all of these are illuminated. So in this particular screen, we have all of these species listed. And Dan's pointing out too here the legend, which shows a color code of each one of the fish species. So we're looking off of North Carolina coast here, and that is a wahoo that Dan's pointing to. So what is this? This is data that our oceanographers have sat down and aggregated, and it is a compilation of various features. This could be plankton fronts, sea surface temperature fronts, bottom contours, a whole host of things that they put together in their recipe for each one of these species. Now, having said this, even though it says Wahoo in that area that Dan just pointed out, what we have found, generally speaking, is besides that specific species, often this is an ideal recipe for a lot of fish. So in all of our trips off and talking to a lot of our brand ambassadors who've gone fishing in these locations, just because it says a specific species, that just means it's more a productive area than most others in its particular ideal conditions for that particular species. All right, let's go on to the next screen. Next is weed lines. Again, probably the easiest to use. Doesn't require a whole lot of thinking or processing. And in this particular screen, what we're looking at is two patches of weed lines, one off the west coast of Florida and one off the east coast of Florida. And also what you see here is the loop button. And so this is where on the fish mapping menu, the loop button comes in real handy, because what we're showing you, if you click the loop to the on position, and you can see in this image, it's currently in the off position. But if you turn it to the on position, you're going to see 3 days worth of data that will funnel through this legend. So if you pay attention, when you turn it on, you'll see in this legend the times update. And we did this intentionally with Garmin because we know that weed lines are constantly moving. The ocean is a big, giant, dynamic creature. There's waves and currents and wind and all kinds of things out there that are moving weed lines. So we wanted to make it a little less than a needle in the haystack and a little easier to discern exactly where weed lines are. So we're going to take this a step further for you and just kind of help you understand how weed lines are formed in the first place. Because if you look at these particular weed lines right on this screen, that's not exactly how the weed line looks. Those are contours around weed line areas. So let's go to the next screen and we'll describe a little bit better what we're looking at here. So on the left-hand screen, you see some light areas and you see some little red patches. We can point right to those red patches. So this is NASA satellite imagery. And so when the satellite passes, it's pulling reflectivity off of the water. And the red spots are the most dense reflective areas denoting floating algae or weed lines. What you're seeing in the white clear areas down below this and all around this area is in this particular screenshot, in this particular pass of the satellites, there was a pretty heavy cloud cover. So clouds definitely impact weed lines. As does, the other features that I mentioned, wind and wave and currents, etc. So what we've done here and what our oceanographers do is they take those most dense areas, the red ones in this case, and the dark orange ones in this particular screen, and then they draw contour lines around them. So if you go to the next screen, and we'll show you again what those contours look like. So what these are contour lines kind of wrapped around the weed line areas. That is not exactly what the weed lines actually look like out there. So these give you an indication of where the heaviest patches, the biggest patches of weed lines are. Again, if anybody has any questions as we go through this, feel free to chat us and just make sure you chat everyone. So we will answer your questions as we can.
One other point about weed lines and the loop feature is because this is satellite imagery and as you can see, it's clearly affected by cloud cover. On a cloudy day, then we won't be able to display any weed lines. So what happens if you turn on the loop feature, you're seeing day before yesterday, and today. Well, it was cloudy yesterday. As the Garmin flips through these 3 days showing you this information, it's not uncommon to see one day the weed lines just go completely blank. They just disappear completely. And that could be either that the weeds have dissipated so that we're not seeing them anymore from imagery, or that it was cloudy. If it was cloudy, typically what will happen is when it loops to the next day, you'll see them reappear. So don't be disconcerted if you see them go away and come back when you have the loop turned on. That's just because the reflectivity had changed and we weren't able to see it on that particular day.
Okay, the next feature is sea surface temperature front strength. So a lot of guys on this call are using sea surface temperatures on your SiriusXM weather already. And so what we've done is we've taken this another level and actually showed front strength. So we have a grading scale. If you look at this first image on the left-hand side, we grade front strengths by weakest being a 1 and strongest being a 4. So what a 4 is telling us is that is the greatest change in temperature or a strong front. Strong fronts typically are where the bait fish collect and where the pelagic fish come to hunt them. And you'll notice in this particular image that that line, that sea surface temperature front number 4, also coincides with quite a few fishing recommendations for obvious reasons. What we did on the right-hand side of this screen, and these are the exact same days, exact same pretty much times and images. So we took exactly where that very strong front is, and we show you how it looks on your regular sea surface temperatures. And what we're seeing here, where that very strong front is, in the top image, we're seeing 57.7 degrees in that blue area, and then just right off to the side of that blue area, we're seeing 67.5, almost a 10-degree break there. It's a huge, very substantial break and a very strong front. So I just wanted to use those for the sake of example. We do not, just so everybody knows on this call, with the fish mapping service or the 8 fish mapping features, we do not allow you to overlay the sea surface temperature colors because it would wash out all the other colors that are part of the fish mapping features. However, having said that, you can always set up a split screen, or you can always go back and look at the sea surface temperatures if that's the way you like to see temperatures. But sea surface temperature front strengths show you those temperatures and obviously the strongest fronts. Okay. Next feature, Dan, you want to jump into this one?
Okay. So as Jeff was just saying, a lot of you have already used our sea surface temperature feature with the offshore package. But because of the various colors that we're now displaying different pieces of information, we still needed to show you temperature breaks. So what we've done here is just shown you, instead of a change in color, we've just drawn a line on each break. So for example, here is a 78-degree temperature break, over here is a 76-degree temperature break, and over here we've got 80. So these would be the same things as you were seeing on that previous slide, where these color changes were occurring. That's all of those temperature break lines just shown to you as a monocolor instead. And like you see, there's still we've got a few fishing recommendations in there as well, so you can kind of see where the recommendations are going to intersect the temperature breaks. Next, not only now can we show you the sea surface temperature, but Maxar, the company that is providing us with this data, has developed a way to give us subsurface temperature as well. So we are showing you the temperature breaks 100 feet down. You won't see anything close to shore because the water's not deep enough, but once you get into deep water, we're going to be able to show you what the temps are at 30 meters, or as I said, 100 feet. Show you where they're at. So those of you that are deep water fishing or looking for thermoclimbs, this is going to be a big advantage. Next, in addition to those features, we're able to show you plankton information. And a lot of services out there today are giving you chlorophyll information. Well, chlorophyll is a byproduct of plankton. So what we've done is gone straight to the source. We're showing you the actual plankton concentrations. And so you'll see these lines, and then there'll be a number along the line, and that's parts per million per cubic meter, what that is. So we have 1 here and 1.4. Basically, you want to find where the higher plankton concentrations are. That's where your bait fish are going to congregate, and that's where hopefully it would be more likely for you to find your fish that you're looking for. So we show the plankton information in 2 ways. Number one is the contours, as we're showing you here, but we also just like we've done with temperature, we've simplified it in that we're showing you plankton front strength. This is where the plankton is building up, where it's more of a drastic change. Basically, this is going to be probably an area where you're going to see a change in the water color, where the turbidity is going to be different, and we're going to show you the edge of that area. And just like with the temperature fronts, it's a number scale of 1 to 4. So you want to look for the 3s and 4s. That's where the plankton's building up. That's where you're going to probably have your best bite activity occurring. The next layer that we've added is sea surface height anomaly. And this is an interesting feature that a lot of people aren't aware of, but your guys fishing tournaments and stuff, they've been watching this for a long time. Sea level basically is not a constant. Sea level actually changes, and we're not talking about wave height here. We're talking about actual sea level can change based on various conditions, current, gravity, gravitational pull, and other factors cause it to change. And they're referred to as upwellings and downwellings. And you'll see there's a negative number right here. That's a downwelling. There's a positive number over here. That's an upwelling. Well, you want to stay away from downwellings because when a downwelling occurs, when the water level drops, it takes all the nutrients with it. It's like flushing a toilet. And there's more than likely not going to be any bite occurring right there. What you want to find is an upwelling or an area between an upwelling and a downwelling. That's where there's going to be more bite activity, because when you get these lines coming very close together like this between a 19-inch upwelling and an 11-inch downwelling, that creates a sort of a water column. And the fish like to congregate along those water columns. So an upwelling or an edge between an upwelling and downwelling is crucial. This is where your best chances are going to be to catch fish. Now, the next thing we can do, as we alluded to earlier, is do a split screen, because all of us have been fishing looking at sea surface temperatures and looking where the temp breaks are, and we've also been following our bottom contours. Well, for the time being, we've left bottom contours off of the fish mapping information. So you can still set up a split screen, and you'll see when you have your unit in split screen mode, it's going to show you where the boat is. And if there's a waypoint on screen, I've put in a waypoint right here. There's a waypoint over here, and you can see they show up on both sides of the screen. So we put a mark at the tip of that bottom contour where that canyon is right there, and then we've marked a spot where we want to try fishing. Over here, I've marked a weed line location. So even though the fish mapping features aren't showing up on this screen, I know where I put my waypoints, places I want to go to, are showing up on that screen, and I can still see my bottom contour and my temperature break as well. And then over on this side, you'll also notice that I left the upwelling, downwelling information on. So I'm looking at weed lines, I'm looking at fishing recommendations, and I'm looking at upwellings. So I've got a nice upwelling going on right here in this whole area, which is probably another reason that we're seeing so many fish recommendations in that area. And there's a little bit of weed right there. So this is definitely going to be my go-to spot for the day. Over here, I'm seeing some weeds, but there's not as much upwelling going on over there. So, that might be my second choice for the day. Over here is going to be my first choice, or along in between where these lines are running together. And I've got another weed location here. That's one of the ways that you can customize these screens to better utilize them. And then another way to mix layers is the plankton and the sea surface front information. Having been out, these are probably one of my two features that I combine and use the most. For example, right here, we've got lines coming together. There's a number 3 and a number 4 going on. That's the green lines. Those are my plankton information. I've got a red 4 over here, red 4 over here. What I like to say is when you've got the red and greens coming together, you've got red and green 4s, boy, that's Christmas. That's where something's going to happen. And, we put a fishing recommendation on top of that spot as well. And again, fishing recommendations, what we're doing there is each fish has a comfort zone that they like. We're saying, hey, today, that's his comfort zone is going to be right in that vicinity. So that's the way we tie everything together and utilize it. And when you zoom out, yeah, it does look a lot like spaghetti, but realize that this scale, we're looking at a 30-mile scale right here. You're probably not going to be zoomed out that far, except when you're looking at where you want to go to. You know, leaving the dock, you might be zoomed out to 30 miles or more, looking at where you want to go. But once you've found a spot, then you're going to zoom in, and you're going to these lines. It's going to look a lot clearer and a lot cleaner. And so we'll show you on the next slide here. I've zoomed in now. I'm on a 20-mile scale, and already you can see these lines are a little bit more spread out. And again, I've split the screen so I can see where my temperatures are. I can see where my waypoints are. And again, I've got a number 3 on my temperature front, and I've got a number 3 on my plankton front, all coming together right there. That's going to be a spot that's likely going to produce some fish. So from there, we just talk about the value points. And again, we're going to come back. I've seen some questions come across. We'll take questions in just a moment. So number 1, again, this can be viewed directly on your chart plotter. You're not having to go out to the internet. You're not having to order this service 2 days ahead of time. You go down to the boat, you turn it on, it's going to be right there for you all the time. It's satellite delivered, just like all of our SiriusXM services, so it's going to work for you from the time you leave the dock up to 150, 200 miles out. As Jeff mentioned earlier, this is a superset. All of our normal weather features are included with this package. So you're getting all of your radar information, you're getting your lightning information, the regular sea surface temperature information. And by the way, the regular sea surface temperature information, we've been able to improve the update rate on that. Sea surface temperature now updates every 3 hours. It used to be every 6 hours. Now, we resend the data every hour. So if you turn your unit on in the morning, you don't have to wait 3 hours. It's set up so every 60 minutes it retransmits. So, you know, worst case scenario, you might have to wait 59 minutes before it comes in. But more than likely, it's going to come in even quicker depending on when you turn on. So this is a superset, includes all of the normal weather features, all your wind and wave information, and then all that comes in at a fixed cost of $99 a month. And we do have a couple of specials going on right now to sweeten that deal as well. There's a $100 rebate, and anybody who signs up for the service, the first month is free, so that's another $100 value right there.
All right.
Jeff, we're about ready to...
Yep. So just didn't see a whole lot of chat. I don't know if it's disabled for some of you, and I know sometimes the chat features and functionality don't work super well. We have received some questions, and I know Dan talked briefly about turbidity and some clear view. It is definitely something we will consider incorporating in the future. But for the time being, as Dan mentioned, if you look at those plankton front strengths and the 4s, which are the strong or the very strong breaks, those are the areas. If you go back to that screen, Dan. Yeah, right there where the 4 is. So that's the area you're most likely going to see that change, right where that 4 is, where it says very strong. And you may even notice, as Dan pointed out, some coloration change. But much like weather, we are going to continuously update and improve this service. Definitely want and need your feedback, and want to hear all your success stories and get pictures from everybody as desired. What else? Are there any questions that anybody has? Lauren or Lucas, did you guys pick up any questions? We also have John Spittle on the call from Garmin as well, if there's Garmin specific questions. Question
hey, Jeff, nothing I'm seeing in the chat.
Okay, got it. There was a question about fish species. So right now there's 6 species in there, and yes, the answer is in working together with Garmin, we will add to that species list to include more offshore species. And I can't promise exactly when that's happening, but we are currently having that discussion and figuring out when we can update that in the near future. All right, let's go back down to the last couple slides if there's no questions. Let's see, Barry Bittman. What's the correlation between specified fish areas and actual catch? Great question, Barry. So we do have some anecdotal information as well as some of the verified trips that we have taken out. This is not a service that goes out and aggregates what everybody has caught and then, tells the world about, where those locations are. We just don't, that's not the kind of service this is. But having said that, we do have quite a few anglers, including ourselves, that have gone offshore and fished in these various areas. So we had a captain leaving Virginia Beach or New Jersey a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and as he was coming down the coast, caught a nice sized wahoo right in one of the wahoo recommendation areas, and several others that have caught fish in these areas. So remember, as I pointed out, even though they specify, specific species of fish, those are generally speaking, and we've validated this time after time, generally speaking, those are going to be your more productive areas where you're seeing bait fish. You may be seeing some weed lines in that area. Your sea surface temperature fronts are going to be strong. So hopefully that answered your question, Barry.
And we've had a question, are we going to expand into the Great Lakes? And the answer to that is we don't have any plans to do that yet. We're focusing on the saltwater market first. Also, Great Lakes are a little bit more difficult as far as the fishing recommendations are concerned. It's interesting, the company that we're working with, Maxar, this team of oceanographers, and they're not just oceanographers, they're actually a satellite company. They provide Google Maps with their satellite imagery. They own satellites, and they use their own imagery. They also have access to all the government satellite information that's out there, and basically they amalgamate all this information and boil it down into something usable. They've been doing this for many years for commercial fishing fleets, offshore fishing for like menhaden and that type of thing. We've just now gotten them to customize that service for the recreational sport fishermen along the coast. Will we expand to the Great Lakes? We don't know yet.
All right, so let's go back down to the bottom slide where that question slide was. And we'll give you a few resources here. I mentioned earlier that we'd love to get your feedback and also hear any questions that you may have. And so if you do need any support or have questions or want to send us pictures or your feedback, that email address is fish.mapping@SiriusXM.com. It looks like there's another question that came through here too that we can answer. Dan, you want to field that one?
Yeah, service updates. I'm not sure what you mean by service updates. For instance, if we would add a species, that would require Garmin, for example, to add that species to the list in the plotter. So, like adding a fish species, that would require a Garmin update. Updates as far as temperature changes, can just like the weather, the recommendations, all of that is automatic. So it kind of depends on what the update is. I think that's about the best that I can describe that.
Yep. As far as software versions, we're on version 17 now, as I recall, Dan.
It's 17.10. Yes. The was released October 30th is the most recent update for all Garmin plotters.
All right. So we encourage you to stay in touch with us. Keep us in the loop if you have questions. Always here to support you. And I know John Spittle is on the call too, so we can always refer your questions to Garmin if they're Garmin-specific questions. But certainly keep us in the loop. Send us your feedback, questions, pictures, etc. For anybody who could not figure out how to log into this webinar, we are going to send you a recording, and we do have another WebEx, the exact, pretty much identical one next Monday. Dan, if you want to go to the next slide, I think I have it here. Yep, here we go. So next Monday at 7:30 p.m., if you have friends that you want to join the webinar, you simply access the webinars at SiriusXM.com/marine webinars, and it'll show you how to sign up right there. So also access our video library. We have a rather extensive list of videos that's growing literally weekly, and that's SiriusXM.com/marine library.
Jeff, did you talk about future fish species?
I didn't specifically talk about species, no, but feel free to.
Yeah, we had the question. So the next species that I think we're looking at, hoping we can add are maybe kingfish and one other, Jeff.
Yep, yeah, kingfish in particular. I know that's just a real big species that people want. So we're working with our oceanographers, and of course we'll work with Garmin on that. And hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be able to announce that we have that in our feed as well. Good. All right. I think that's it as far as questions. Keep us in the loop. Thank you everybody for joining us. Really appreciate your time. Hopefully you got something out of this call, and always feel free to reach out to us. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.